Chapter 39. Threat Modeling. Threat modeling is the process at looking at all the significant and likely potential threats to a scoped scenario, ranking their potential damage in a given time period, and figuring cost-effective mitigations to defeat the highest priority threats. Threat modeling is used in all sorts of industries and, in our particular case, planning computer security defenses. Threat modeling is used in the Security Development Lifecycle (SDL) efforts when programming and reviewing software and across computer devices and infrastructure. Only by using threat modeling can a defender quantify threats, risks, and mitigations, and compare the implemented plan against the reality of what occurs. Why threat model? Threat modeling reduces risk. At the very least, it allows one or more people to consider the various threats and risks in a scenario. It allows multiple threats to be weighed against each other, mitigations to be developed and evaluated, and, hopefully, cost-effective, useful mitigations to be deployed. We know for sure that, over the long run, software programmed using threat modeling consideration has fewer bugs and vulnerabilities than software that is not threat modeled. If software is being threat modeled for the first time, modelers may discover more bugs and vulnerabilities than in a prior period, and that increased number of vulnerabilities may continue for some period of time. But eventually the number of newly discovered bugs and vulnerability should fall. And in the end, over the lifetime of the project or product, the number of total bugs and the total possible damage they might create should be reduced. Otherwise, why perform threat modeling? Threat modeling even considers whether a very effective mitigation is cost-effective. It could be that a very good mitigation could be so expensive, in cost, resources, performance issues, and so on, that even though it might offset a particular risk, it isn't cost-efficient to do so. For example, suppose computer viruses cause $100,000 in damage every year to a company. That company would not want to spend more than $100,000 to stop computer viruses. It might be that not using any computer virus mitigations could be the best decision they can make, in this super silly simple example. Threat modeling models. There are nearly as many models for threat modeling as there are types of threats. They are normally known by acronyms such as STRIDE, PASTA, VAST, TRIKE, and OCTAVE. There are many software tools that have their own models or that base themselves on one of the existing models. Each model has fans and critics. It's far more important for developers and computer security providers to threat model, using any model, than to not threat model because they can't determine which model they should use. Simply doing threat modeling is a win. Each model attempts to capture the processes of understanding what the project under consideration is in its totality. Usually this is done by brainstorming, flowchart diagrams, and a detailed description of the involved processes. Then all the potential threats to the project, program, or service are considered. They are ranked for likelihood and potential damage. The threats and risks that are more likely to cause the most damage are considered first. Then mitigations are developed and evaluated for fitness and cost efficiency against each particular threat. All threat models must start with the concept of how much leftover, residual risk the owner is willing or able to accept after all agreed-upon mitigations are applied. For example, threat modeling offensive or defensive military weapons begins with the idea that there is very little acceptable residual risk. One company might allow some risk to remain, while another with strict resource constraints might be forced to knowingly accept many large unresolved risks. Threat modeling helps users prepare for leftover residual risk scenarios. Some threat models even give time to the known unknowns and unknown unknowns, for the same reason and to remind users that not all risks will ever be thought of and mitigated. Threat actors. Every threat model must also consider the most likely types of hackers that might target their project. There are a wide range of different types of threat actors, each with their own concerns. Nation-states. Most industrialized nations now have teams of bright, capable, and resourced hackers, dutifully and patriotically hacking on behalf of the country's government or military. They are attacking and compromising other countries for strategies and targets deemed essential to their country's success. Cyber warfare is also a huge component of this type of threat actor. Cyber warfare attempts to harm an enemy's ability to wage war or mount a good defense by utilizing professional hackers and malware. A great example is the Stuxnet worm, which destroyed another nation's nuclear equipment. Other types of threats may come and go, but nation-state attackers are with us forever. Industrial hackers. There are hackers that focus on stealing other companies' secrets and intellectual property in order to resell them or to help another company or industry unfairly compete. This type of threat may operate from a competing company, act on behalf of a nation-state, or act independently as a freelancer. Note: both nation-states and industrial hackers are known as Advanced Persistent Threats, APTs. APTs are human adversaries that hack in a professional way as part of a long-term, concentrated effort against targeted adversaries. They usually have vast resources and are very, very difficult to stop from being successful. Financial crime. Financial cyber attackers are represented by ransomware distributors, denial-of-service implementers, adware markers, and hackers who steal digital money, steal authentication information, or commit identity theft. Money has motivated criminals for longer than computers have been around, but the current state of computer security allows large sums of money to be stolen more easily and with far less risk than traditional non-computer-related crime. Hacktivists. Politically, morally, and psychologically motivated people often like to cause damage to finances, reputation, or resources to companies and organizations they disagree with. Some of the largest and most damaging attacks in history have been hacktivist-related. Gamers. Computer games and gamers force software and hardware makers to push the technological and performance limits more than almost any other group. Today, not only do people pay money to play games, they pay money to watch other people play games. Gamers fill concert halls as quickly as yesterday's rock stars. Sometimes it seems as if half the television ads during the most watched television events, such as the Super Bowl, are ads for computer games. To say computer gaming is very popular is an understatement. Some hackers exist solely to hack computer games to increase their winnings, whatever that means, to give themselves competitive advantages, and to hurt gaming services they don't agree with. Insider threats. It's always been debated how big of a threat legitimate employees are to a company, but it's clear that they represent some non-minor % of all attackers. Some insiders steal data and other intellectual property to sell to competitors or take on their way to another job. Others steal money or information, such as customer credit cards for personal financial gain. Insiders doing unauthorized things are very difficult to detect and prevent, especially when conducting transactions using their legitimate authority. This is a threat that the computer security industry is still struggling with. Ordinary solitary hackers or hacker groups. Let's not forget the traditional hackers who are hacking for their own individual needs, be it financial gain or just to prove they can do it. A decade or more ago, this group compromised almost all hacking. The hacking world wasn't filled by professional criminals. Most hackers were content to just write a computer virus that printed a funny saying on the computer or played Yankee Doodle Dandy at a predetermined time. A few caused real damage, like the Michelangelo boot virus did when it formatted hard drives. But most were just someone's vanity project, a way of saying that they were smart enough to do it. They didn't want to cause real widespread harm. Threat modeling is something developers and every computer security professional should do. It efficiently reduces risk by ranking threats based on the damage they are likely to cause. If you don't threat model, you're just guessing and wandering around in the computer security defense landscape. The next chapter profiles Adam Shostak, a respected threat modeler and author. Chapter 40. Profile. Adam Shostak. One of my first encounters with Adam Shostak was at Microsoft when he was driving a new way of thinking around a type of problem. In this specific case, it was how to defeat the configure worm. n.wikipedia.org/wiki/configure. Configure was a particularly nasty malware program that first appeared at the end of 2008. It had several ways of spreading, such as vectors, including guessing at weakly password-protected file shares, a desktop INI trick, patched software vulnerabilities, and via USB drives, using Windows' built-in auto-run feature. Configure was infecting millions of machines a year and was showing no signs of abating. Anti-malware vendors were readily detecting it, and Microsoft had put out several articles on how to stop it from spreading, but it was still prolific. Shostak proposed using data analysis to look at the problem. He and Microsoft started looking at which attack vectors were allowing Configure to spread the most. Our initial assumption had been that most of the people being infected had not applied a long-available patch, and that was indeed one of the most popular vectors early on. But now, nearly 2 years later, Shostak found out that it was largely due to infected USB keys. Using his collected data, he proposed that Microsoft disable the auto-run feature, which was a huge decision. It meant changing the way Windows worked, and was going to force all users, infected or not, to now do something extra to make executables on removable media run. Auto-run would no longer execute. But Shostak had the data. The powers that be agreed with the approach, and on our next Patch Tuesday, Microsoft pushed an update that disabled the auto-run feature. And just like that, Configure died. Well, it didn't die completely, but it stopped being the huge problem that it was, and it hasn't been a big issue since. In fact, malware spreading via USB keys hasn't been a big problem since. Shostak's and Microsoft's approach of using data to drive the response had a huge impact on me. It led me to writing what I think is the most important concept and white paper of my career, implementing a data-driven computer security defense. gallery.technet.microsoft.com/fixing-the-1-2E58AC4A, which has since gone on to be recommended reading by many industry luminaries and groups. Later on, I read Shostak's book, Threat Modeling, Designing for Security. Amazon.com/threat-modeling-Adam-Shostak/DP/1118809998 by Wiley. It was clear that he really understood threat modeling and the errors in other models and implementations. It's still one of the top books I recommend to people interested in threat modeling. Shostak was intimately involved at Microsoft, helping with multiple projects, like pushing out the auto-run fix to stop malware like the Configure worm, the SDL threat modeling tool, Microsoft.com/n-us/sdl/adopt/threatmodeling.aspx, and the elevation of privilege threat modeling game, Microsoft.com/n-us/sdl/adopt/eop.aspx. He co-founded the Privacy Enhancing Technologies Symposium and International Financial Cryptography Association. He's also a prolific writer, blogger, and speaker. I asked him how he got into computer security. He said, "Professionally, I was working as a sysadmin in a medical research lab, and security was a part of my job. This was in 1993 and 1994. I started reading several early internet mailing lists, such as the original firewalls and the cyberpunks mailing lists. They had all sorts of interesting people saying interesting things. I started to participate and learned that I could contribute to the discussion. My next job was more security-focused. I became a consultant around Boston, and this was just as the Internet was really taking off. So, knowing about security and being able to contribute about Internet security really helped. I was able to find security flaws in a couple of things, and that helped my reputation. I asked him for an example of what he meant. He replied, I found a security vulnerability in a security key fob. It was the precursor of the RSA Secure ID before it was bought by RSA. The flaw was that information from the previous message was used to help secure the next message. Except they had a flaw in the algorithm that connected the prior message to the next that made the key that linked them predictable and from that forgeable. I asked him how he got involved in Common Vulnerabilities and Exposures, CVE, the Dictionary of Publicly Known Information Security Vulnerabilities and Exposures. He said, one of my consulting clients was Fidelity Investments. They had me doing secure code work, much like I would return to 15 years later at Microsoft. I was still staying very active in mailing lists and the Internet, sharing things and getting feedback from those sources. I'll always be thankful that the executives allowed me to do that, because not all executives or companies allow that type of sharing. From Fidelity, I ran into a venture capitalist who owned a chunk of a vulnerability scanning company, and I thought that it would be interesting, so I moved there. We were very competitive over how many vulnerabilities we could detect, and making sure our product detected the most. I was working on a new FingerD vulnerability, and I couldn't tell if one of our competitors' products was detecting the same vulnerability or if it was something different. At the time, vulnerability information stank, and so did search engines. You couldn't find out information nearly as easily as you can today. I started out wondering how we could talk to other vulnerability management software people on what vulnerabilities we found or didn't find, and that thinking led me into thinking about how to communicate with sysadmins so they could identify different vulnerabilities and figure out if they had fixed them or not. We needed a system to help bring different types of people together to talk about the same things in similar ways and understand each other. CVE did that. I asked Shostak what he specifically contributed to threat modeling. He hesitated a brief moment and then responded, I listened when people told me something wasn't working. Some people try to teach people around why something isn't working, but I see that it isn't working and it's the system that needs to change. For example, if someone is opening an email and getting infected all the time, even if you're telling them not to open untrusted emails, the problem is with the system, not the user. We've got to design systems that take into account what people do, because they aren't doing it wrong. The systems are. I'm reading about aircraft safety systems because in computer security, we don't examine our failures very well. But in the aircraft industry, they do. Even if all they have is a near-miss incident, there's a form any pilot can fill out about the near-miss and send into a common agency. The agency collects all these forms and examines each one. They can see common mistakes, even if it is at first being reported as human error. The agency can send a recommendation to a radio manufacturer and tell them how they can improve the radio issue by adding a light or tell a particular airport or bunch of airports how to fix a problem with the runway lighting. It's blameless root cause analysis. The computer security field doesn't analyze things well, so we end up repeating the same mistakes over and over, and it takes longer to design better systems. I ended our interview by asking what he would recommend to young people getting in the field of computer security. He replied, 2 things. First, I think students can benefit by studying the humanities, psychology, philosophy, etc. Early on in my career, I was studying environmental science. I learned that our environmental issues are impacted by political, legal, and economic issues, and if you don't solve those issues, you won't solve the environmental issue. The same with computer security. There are technical issues, to be sure, but you have to understand the political, legal, and economic issues as well if you want to solve the technical issue. It isn't just a problem with the firewall. Also, learn how to write. Second, the technology skills you acquire aren't as important as learning how to think. The technology issues I faced when I first entered this field, compared to now, are not even close. The IT world changes all the time, but the approach I use stays the same. I try to look at the big problems and ask why something doesn't work. I want to find a big problem with a broad issue, but narrow the focus enough that I can solve that issue. You can't solve big problems immediately. Listeners need to pick the right problems, the meaningful ones, ask the right questions, and then find the levers you can use to affect them. For more information on Adam Shostak. For information about Adam Shostak, check out these resources. Threat Modeling, Designing for Security. Amazon.com/threat-modeling-designing-adam-shostak/DP/111-880-9998. The New School of Information Security, co-authored with Andrew Stewart. Amazon.com/new-school-information-security/DP/0321814908. Adam Shostak's website, adam.shostak.org/ Adam Shostak on Twitter, twitter.com/Adam Shostak. Adam Shostak's LinkedIn profile, linkedin.com/in/Shostak/. Chapter 41. Computer Security Education. One bit of advice that has been consistent from almost every person profiled in this book is their belief that more and better computer security education is needed. No one thinks that any perfect technology solution will become available any time reasonably soon that will preclude people needing to be aware of computer security threats and how to handle them. Some computer security experts claim that it's a waste of time trying to educate end users. But most serious security professionals know that education for end users and staff can only help. My current employer, Microsoft, forces all employees to undertake annual computer security training on multiple topics. One year, after we had been getting a lot of email phishing attempts, the mandatory training video included a well-respected Microsoft employee who had been tricked by a phishing email. He was well-liked, and he worked in a field that required heavy computer security knowledge. In short, he should have been less likely to be socially engineered by a phishing email, but it happened to him. He shared his experience, including how he fell for the well-crafted, targeted spear phishing attempt. It was wonderful to see one of our technological leaders share that he was fallible, that he made a mistake and how that mistake happened. He then shared that although he was personally a bit embarrassed about his mistake, he wasn't too ashamed to call IT security to report the incident. It was a tremendously well-received educational video that led to significantly lower numbers of successful phishing. The education was so successful that the Microsoft IT security teams were inundated all year with people asking whether suspicious-looking but legitimate emails were actually phishing emails. Some people even said the education was overly successful. Other education videos in prior years covered not getting tricked into giving your password away and making sure that people did not walk in behind you without having their own building access badge. Education can help to significantly reduce computer security threats. Computer security training topics. Computer security training comes in many varieties and approaches. The following sections examine some of the topics that people interested in computer security training can avail themselves of. End-user/security awareness training. This type of training typically prepares end users for using their computers and devices more safely. It shares with them common forms of hacking they may be exposed to and how to detect, prevent, and report attacks. Everyone should get this form of security education, whether at home, going to school, or in an office. It should be taken at least once a year, if not more frequently, and should cover recent and most likely threats. This sort of training typically only requires dedicating 15 minutes to a few hours each year. General IT Security Training. This is for IT and computer security staff members. It should provide a general overview of all types of hacking and malware and go into more detail on the most common and likely to happen threats. Typically, this type of training happens over many days or weeks and can recur with increasing maturation over time. Incident response. Computer security staff, and particularly members of incident response teams, should be trained in how to correctly respond to and manage computer security incidents. This should be required training for all personnel who share these responsibilities. This sort of training usually lasts several days and should be repeated as needed. OS and application-specific training. Many popular OS and application vendors offer general and product-specific security training. Vendor-specific training can supplement your general security knowledge, and if tested and/or used as part of a certification, it can attest to your knowledge of a particular product. Technical skills. Many training and certification entities offer security technical training. This includes learning skills around particular types of security products, such as firewalls, intrusion detection, malware analysis, cryptography, patching, backing up, and so on. Certifications. There are dozens of computer security-related certifications. Every computer certification that a certification candidate studies for and/or takes a test for will contribute to their overall education. There are no right or wrong certifications. However, there are certainly some certifications that are more respected in the industry than others as a measure of computer security fitness. In general, any of the certifications from the following organizations are widely respected, in no particular order: International Information Systems Security Certifications Consortium, ISC², ISE2.org/ International Council of Electronic Commerce Consultants, EC Council, ecouncil.org/ Sysadmin Networking and Security, SANS Institute, SANS.org, Computing Technology Industry Association, CompTIA, certification.comptia.org/ Information Systems Audit and Control Association, ISACA, ISACA.org. Well-respected vendor-specific exams are also offered by Microsoft, Cisco, and Red Hat. This list is not exhaustive, and there are certainly many other vendors that offer great exams in education. For more information, see my recent InfoWorld column on computer security certifications. infoworld.com/3115344/essential-security-for-smart-security-pros.html. Training methods. There are as many ways to learn as there are things to learn. The following sections explore some of the common ways. Online training. There is almost no test, certification, or topic that you can't master using online training. Online training can simply be teacher videos, or it can be fully immersive teaching experiences with text, videos, chapter reviews, and competency testing. Many have real-time teachers to whom you can raise a digital hand and ask questions. Some people prefer in-person teachers in a real classroom, but it is becoming more common for online training to give you nearly the same experience, usually for a far cheaper price. Break into my website. There are many online security education sites that primarily work by allowing you to break into, legally, their website. It's a great way of teaching a skill and allowing a budding hacker to experience the thrill of breaking into something without the possible legal consequences of doing it illegally. One of my favorite sites of this type is hackthisSite.org/ Schools and training centers. Today, there aren't many major universities, colleges, technical colleges, or formal training schools that do not have a computer security curriculum. Although these are usually more expensive than other training options, and you do need to make sure that you are not just getting talked out of your hard-earned dollars by diploma mills that don't really prepare you for your good jobs, they can often give a very thorough and comprehensive security education. Many computer security professionals start off at technical schools or local community colleges and then eventually progress to full 4-year college degrees or even further. Boot camps. Boot camps are places that offer accelerated training, usually focused on obtaining a specific certification. For example, a 2-week boot camp could help you get the same certifications you could otherwise get in a 1 to 2 year technical school. I love boot camps, and for 2 years even taught at some. If you're attending a boot camp, you have to be ready for intense study and should be the type of individual who can cram a lot of information into a short period of time. For many people with busy lives, boot camps are their best alternative for getting their education. Just make sure your boot camp offers money-back guarantees or multiple test taking when going for a certification. Corporate training. As covered in the Computer Security Training Topics section in this chapter, many organizations offer and even require mandatory computer security education. Many large companies offer partial or full tuition reimbursement programs and have employee-led group meetings around particular security topics or certifications. Many employees consider the corporate-offered educational benefits to be one of the best benefits of working for a particular company. Books. Of course, my books chapter on education would not be complete without mentioning that books are a great way to learn about a topic at your own place and pace. Computer books are generally more inclusive around their topic, offer longer introductions to new material, and are usually professionally edited for technical detail and grammar. Continuing relevant education is essential for end users, IT staff, and computer security experts alike. One of the most common threads I learned from interviewing all the people profiled in this book is that most of them are continuous learners, and the cream of the crop even reserve a specific time period each day dedicated to learning something new. Go forth and learn. Chapter 42. Profile. Stephen Northcutt. I've known Stephen Northcutt for almost 20 years. He's not only a vital part of the incredible computer security training organization, the Sysadmin Networking and Security (SANS) Institute, but he's an indispensable person if you're trying to locate a particular industry luminary. I don't know how many times in my writing career that when I needed to speak to someone, all I had to do was call Northcutt, and he set up the introductions. Sometimes it seems he has met and impressed nearly everyone. Northcutt is a super friendly and thoughtful dealmaker. He comes up with great ideas and has a way of motivating others around him to march off and make those plans happen. Some people have that special charisma that makes people want to be around them and to want to make things happen. Northcutt is that type of guy, and I'm sure that's why SANS got him involved early on when it was just a speck of the organization that it is today. Northcutt has also been an early investor in some of the most profitable computer security companies of our time, including Tenable, Tenable.com, and SourceFire. The SANS Institute, SANS.org, has been around since 1989, and from the start has taught some of the best computer security classes available. Their initial security conferences turned into industry-respected certifications, and their certifications turned into industry-accredited curricula offering 2 Master of Science degree programs. In Information Security Engineering, MSISE, and Information Security Management, MSISM. And 3 post-baccalaureate certificate programs, Penetration Testing and Ethical Hacking, Incident Response, and Cybersecurity Engineering. They have taught over 100,000 people and have some of the most sought-after instructors, many of whom have published best-selling books. As an employer, if you come across someone with a SANS certificate or degree, you know you have the cream of the crop. I consider their online newsletters, sans.org/newsletters/ to be must-read material for any computer security professional, and their Internet Storm Center is often the first place to notice a new attack. Even though I've known Northcutt for almost 2 decades, I've never asked him the story of how he got into computer security. So, I asked. He replied, "I was a network designer working in a Navy lab running a Sun workstation. I knew nothing about computer security. One day I discovered someone hacking my computer and I flipped out. The connection was coming from Australia, and they were compiling a program on my computer. I didn't know what to do, so I pulled the cord. That was my response. Afterwards, I felt so violated. I started to learn about computer security and eventually got funding. Back in those days, if you had a good idea, it was easy to get funding. I learned a lot about computer security, and I eventually got the number 2 slot under Fred Kirby. Fred Kirby was the Information Assurance Manager at the Naval Surface Warfare Center, Dahlgren Division, for more than 16 years, and now is a SANS instructor. I really got into intrusion detection. I wrote the Shadow Intrusion Detection System, which was really good for its time. I started an intrusion detection team, and we ended up monitoring over 30 military bases. He ended up being chief for information warfare at the Ballistic Missile Defense Organization. I made the radical mistake of accepting a position at the Pentagon. I went from where I was heavy in technical detail to a place where I couldn't do anything technical. My job was to go to meetings and sign papers. I made it a year. This was in 1999. Although Northcutt wasn't one of the SANS co-founders, those were Michelle Gell, Dr. Eugene Schultz, Alan Paller, and Dr. Matt Bishop. He was frequently meeting with Alan early on. I asked how he got involved with SANS. He said, "In 1999, I was being goat-roped into a special project at the Pentagon around the Y2K undertaking, and fears that hackers would exploit it. I created a great team, including some of the best technical analysts in the world. I loved that part, but managing it was very political, which is something I didn't love. Alan Paller came in and took charge of the political stuff, while I concentrated on the technical stuff. I attended and taught at a great SANS conference on intrusion detection in December of 1999, and I remember I really enjoyed it far more than the political stuff. So I went back to my office in the Pentagon and threw all my stuff in a suitcase and never looked back. I started with SANS officially on January 5, 2000. At the time, they only had 2 events, a spring and a fall event. Each event was 4 days long. There were some educational classes before the main conference. The main conference was 2 days long, and it was followed by another day of training classes. It was great, but I remember saying to Alan, "This is a lot of work for just 2 events a year." And so it grew. I attended some early SANS classes, back before you could get certified in something. I remember each of those classes as being the best classes on their subject still to this day. I remember who taught them and what I learned. I even took a class on the snort intrusion detection tool by its creator, Marty Resch, back in 1998 or 1999. When I told Northcutt of my recollection, he said, "I remember Marty coming up to me, this young kid, and he said, 'I have built a new intrusion detection tool, and it's better than yours, Shadow.'" And he was right. I ended up being an early investor in Marty's commercial SourceFire venture. SourceFire was so successful that it was later bought by Cisco. I asked Northcutt when the idea of moving from training to certification began to take place. He said, "It was Alan's idea." I understood what he was saying right away about how companies wanted to make sure they were getting their money's worth for the training, and a certification was one way of making sure they got the training. I remembered when I was still at the Navy lab, and I sent some people to the Unix LISA conference. I showed up at the conference, but I couldn't find them. I eventually found them kayaking in the ocean, so I understood the value of certifications. The idea of certification tracks came even before that. Alan had come down to see me at the Navy lab in 1998 and challenged me to identify all the job areas that were in computer security. There weren't a lot of them at the time: IDS, firewalls, malware detection, and a few others. So when we started talking about certifications, we both thought making sure the education and tracks were based around particular tasks was the best way to approach it. We eventually made our more holistic GIAC Security Essentials certification, GSEC, which is sort of like our version of the CISSP. The GSEC is not very technically focused. It's a mile wide and 2 inches deep. But we decided that we had to prepare people about security in general before they began taking domain-specific tasks full of command lines. As we finished the interview, I remembered one of our earliest meetings. Northcutt had a great idea he wanted to run by me in person at his house in Hawaii. I told him that I was spending the week head down, finishing up my first book, Malicious Mobile Code. Amazon.com/malicious-mobile-code-protection-windows/DP/156592-682X. I was already way behind the deadline, and this 1 week was all I needed to finally finish it and get it to the publisher. But he was persistent. I remember what he said as if it was the other day. He said, "Hey, you and your wife like scuba diving, right? Well, my next-door neighbor and friend runs Dive Hawaii, and I'll get you and your wife on some great dives." I again said thanks, but that I could not make time to fly to Hawaii, meet, and dive. He countered, "What's your wife's name and number? I'll call her to let her know the deal and see what she wants to do." I never did give him her name or number. I didn't fly to Hawaii, and I got my first book finally done. But to this day, I regret not taking him up on it. That's the type of guy he is. Even the deals you don't take him up on, you remember forever. For more information on Stephen Northcutt. For information about Stephen Northcutt, check out these resources. Stephen Northcutt's LinkedIn profile, linkedin.com/in/Stephen Ray Northcutt. Stephen Northcutt on SANS, sans.org/instructors/Stephen-Northcutt. Stephen Northcutt on Facebook, facebook.com/Stephen.Northcutt. Network Intrusion Detection, co-authored with Jody Novak. Amazon.com/network-intrusion-detection-Stephen-Northcutt/DP/073-571-2654. Chapter 43. Privacy. Many people, including the author of this book, believe that personal privacy, especially in digital age, should be a guaranteed innate right of all human beings. Unfortunately, much of our digital and financial privacy is long gone. Internet search engines, online advertisers, and software vendors often know more about you than anyone besides yourself. A few years ago, an enraged parent visited Target because the store's marketing department was sending unsolicited ads for baby supplies to his teenage daughter. He eventually had to apologize when he learned Target knew more about his daughter than he did. Forbes.com/sites/Kashmir Hill/2012/02/16/how-target-figured-out-a-girl-was-before-her-father-did. Hashtag D84BCCE34C62. In most countries, and certainly on the Internet, your privacy is gone. Nothing you do is truly private. Even ultra-privacy promoting apps like Tor and the Darknet, which claim they give you the best privacy possible, don't really work all that well for real-world applications. Don't believe me? Ask all the arrested criminals who thought Tor or their anonymity service was providing absolute anonymity. There are lots of ways to increase privacy, but as long as tracking you and your activities is legal, companies and law enforcement are going to do it. This is not to say that some governments and companies aren't trying to give you some reasonable level of online privacy. For example, the recently enacted European Union's General Data Protection Regulation, n.wikipedia.org/wiki/general_data_protection_regulation, can penalize firms for up to 4% of their revenues for violating the act. Most countries have some form of official regulations, or multiple regulations, that purport to protect citizens' private data. Unfortunately, most laws and regulations are half-efforts that appear more likely to protect the governments and businesses that collect personal data than to protect citizens' privacy. And many countries, especially in the Asia-Pacific region, outright reject any regulation that would prevent the government from wholesale monitoring of their citizens. Culturally, the majority of their populations often accept it without complaint. They give up their privacy for purported security. It's often an easy sell in countries without a history of trying to protect citizen privacy. Still, violating a country's privacy laws can be very expensive for violators. Government departments and entire governments have been found guilty of violating standing privacy laws, although they are almost never punished. Businesses, on the other hand, can get in trouble a lot more easily. It is increasingly common for corporations to have privacy divisions, and even someone at the C-level whose job it is to protect customer data privacy. Privacy organizations. Luckily for the world, many organizations exist that fight for every world citizen's right to privacy. These include the Electronic Frontier Foundation, EFF.org/, and the Electronic Privacy Information Center, EPIC.org/. The Electronic Frontier Foundation, EFF, was founded in 1990 to promote government transparency, user privacy, and freedom of speech around the world. They do this through a combination of litigation, activism, policy analysis, white papers, and technical tool creation. They are very active in several court cases, including one where they are fighting for the right of companies to refill and sell vendor ink cartridges. EFF.org/cases/impression-products-ink-v-lexmark-international-ink. Their privacy tools include HTTPS Everywhere, EFF.org/HTTPS-Everywhere, which is a Firefox, Chrome, and Opera browser extension to maximize the use of HTTPS, and Privacy Badger, which blocks ads and other tracking tools. The Electronic Privacy Information Center, EPIC, is a public research center founded in 1994 that focuses on protecting privacy, freedom of speech, civil liberties, and other democratic values, largely using litigation, publication, and other advocacy means. They use the court system even more than EFF does, and both are advocating better cybersecurity, as well as not letting cybersecurity trample on their other goals. Their list of privacy issues is huge, epic.org/privacy/. Hearing about the policy issues contained at either EFF or EPIC usually shocks most people not previously well-versed in the topics. It's amazing how much of our privacy is already gone. There's almost nothing left. Both organizations are 501c3 nonprofit organizations that depend on donations. If you care about privacy and freedom of speech, consider donating to a privacy advocating organization. A special shout-out must go to Bruce Schneier, schneier.com/ for his untiring efforts to educate us and protect individual privacy. Schneier has been speaking publicly against our privacy erosions for as long as anyone, and his books, especially David and Goliath, amazon.com/data-goliath-collect-control/DP/039335217X/ are must-reads for people concerned about where our privacy currently is and where it is headed. You can hear more about Bruce Schneier in Chapter 3. Privacy-protecting applications. None of the prior dire warnings about our diminishing privacy should be construed to mean there is nothing we can do to make our privacy better. Many excellent freely available applications give you as much individual privacy as possible with a minimum of discomfort. Nearly every privacy advocate will suggest using Tor-enabled software, torproject.org/ to make privacy invasion harder for anyone other than the very well-resourced. The privacy given by Tor may have its issues, but it's the best we're going to get in general-purpose software. Many privacy-minded people like to use the DuckDuckGo, duckduckgo.com/ internet search engine instead of the more well-known engines that are funded by invading your privacy. There are many software vendors competing to protect your privacy. Please read the author's privacy application picks at info-world.com/security/17-essential-tools-2-protect-your-online-identity-and-privacy.html for more privacy-protecting software. We cannot have security and freedom without individual privacy. The next chapter profiles Eva Galperin, who works for the Electronic Frontier Foundation. Chapter 44. Profile. Eva Galperin. You've got to love a person who likes computers and cybersecurity and spends their free time hanging out performing aerial acrobatics at circuses for a hobby. The Electronic Frontier Foundation's EFF.org Director of Cybersecurity, Eva Galperin, is such a person. Working for EFF since 2007, she became their Director of Cybersecurity in 2017. Prior to EFF, she earned degrees in political science and international relations from San Francisco State University. Her work primarily focuses on providing privacy, free speech, and security for everyone around the world, along with examining malware that threatens the same. Galperin is now known around the world for her work in the field, writing about the malware she has come across, and speaking at security conferences like Black Hat. blackhat.com/us-speakers/eva-galperin.html. I asked Galperin how she got into computer security, and she replied, "I got into computers fairly early. My dad was a computer security guy, and I asked him about hanging out on Prodigy, a precursor of AOL and other online services. Instead, he created me a desktop on his Unix Solaris computer. Age 12 on a Unix machine, can you imagine? I was in the Usenet discussion areas about science fiction books, playing interactive text games, and when the web came along, I got into building web pages. I put myself through college as a Unix system administrator, and back then being a sysadmin meant it included computer security." I asked her how she got into EFF and malware analysis. She said, "I came to EFF in 2007 for the activism. I ended up doing cybersecurity research because no one else at EFF was doing it. My start in malware analysis goes back to 2011 and 2012 in Syria. Back then, Syrian President Bashar Hafez al-Assad was the darling of the West. He promoted himself as the father of the Syrian Internet, and he opened access to Facebook, which had previously been blocked. Everybody thought he was great. Westerners thought that his unblocking Facebook was a sign of Assad's increasing openness towards free speech. They were really, really wrong. What he was really doing was man-in-the-middling conversations. I was working on Syria, doing research on free speech and censorship issues, when someone found malware that was created by pro-Assad hackers, targeting supporters of the opposition. It was RAT, Remote Access Trojan, installed on their machines to exfiltrate data, including passwords and screenshots, to a Syrian IP address. Together we analyzed it. Over the next 2 years, I helped write about a dozen reports on the 2 pro-Assad groups writing this kind of malware. I asked Galperin what she saw as the biggest problem in computer security. She replied, "The biggest problem in computer security isn't security. It's privacy. A lot of companies prioritize computer security, but not protecting the privacy of their users. Many companies monetize user data, which incentivizes them to collect as much of that data as possible. Many companies have large amounts of extremely detailed user data, and once they have it, the data is subject to legal hacks, subpoenas and warrants, as well as the kinds of technical attacks that information security people usually spend their time thinking about. Even if a company is protecting their data from hackers, they have a harder time protecting it from law enforcement and government. Often they're not even thinking about governments and law enforcement as attackers. I want to be clear that I'm not advocating that companies shouldn't collect data, but users should have the power over their own data. The user should know when it's being collected, what's being collected, how it's being used, how long it's being kept, how it's being secured, etc. User choice is extremely important. I wondered, with her experience with many different governments, how the United States stacked up against other countries on protecting privacy, on a scale from 1 to 10, with a 10 being the best protectors of privacy. She said, the U.S. is maybe a 4 or 5 on protecting privacy. The strongest digital privacy protections are in the European Union. On the other hand, the U.S. has much stronger protections for freedom of speech, while free expression protections in the EU are much weaker. I asked her if she thought privacy and free speech would get better or worse over time. She replied, "It would be easy to say things will get worse. Someone says that, and when it happens, they seem like a genius. But I'm going to take a different tactic. I think there is a chance things will improve over time, but as long as the user's information is the product and free software or service is what they exchange for it, it's going to be very hard. We do know that users do value privacy and would often be willing to pay for it if you gave them a choice. But you have to give them the option, and I'm not sure if that will be the case because the big players are becoming more powerful, and that's not compatible with the current business model." Lastly, I had to ask Galperin how she got into aerial circus activities as a hobby. She replied, "I was a gymnast in middle school. My high school has a circus, so I did acrobats instead of sports. After high school, I did some aerial acrobatics, and I got back into it in my 20s. It's great exercise. And when you're 30 feet up in the air swinging, you're not thinking about the internet. I don't know about you, but I like knowing that one of our biggest privacy advocates doesn't mind taking risks, in either her advocacy or her hobbies." For more information on Eva Galperin. For more information about Eva Galperin, check out these resources. Eva Galperin on Twitter. Twitter.com/EvaCIDE. Eva Galperin's Electronic Frontier Foundation, EFF profile. EFF.org/about/staff/Eva-Galperin. Chapter 45. Patching. Every day, millions of websites and emails contain links to malware known as exploit kits. Malicious programmers or programming teams create exploit kits and then use them or sell them. An exploit kit usually contains everything a wannabe hacker can need in the exploit cycle, including 24/7 technical support and auto-updating to avoid getting caught by antivirus scanners. A good exploit kit will even find and maliciously modify otherwise innocent websites to ensure it gets executed whenever visitors browse to the infected website. All the attacker has to do is buy the kit, execute it, and send it along its way to find victim websites. Exploit kits almost always contain client-side, programs that run on end-user desktops versus code meant to exploit servers, exploitation routines that check for multiple missing patches. They can check for anywhere from a handful of vulnerabilities to several dozen. Any unpatched unlucky visitor gets silently exploited by what is also known as a drive-by download attack, whereas fully patched web surfers usually get prompted by a social engineering trick to install a Trojan horse program. Exploit kit bad guys would rather exploit unpatched devices than use social engineering, because not all end users will automatically agree to install any program they are prompted to install. The involved vulnerabilities are routinely updated so that the exploit kit can be as successful as possible. Most exploit kits even contain centralized management consoles so the criminals can check to see what vulnerabilities are working and how devices are infected. Even without exploit kits being involved, missing security patches are one of the biggest problems that allow successful exploitation. This may change one day, but so far this fact has been true for more than 3 decades. To give yourself or your computers the best protection against software vulnerability exploitation, all you have to do is apply security patches in a timely and consistent manner. That sounds easy enough to do. There are even dozens of tools that can help you. Unfortunately, effective patching remains overly difficult and elusive. In my entire career scanning hundreds and hundreds of thousands of computers for patching, I don't think I've ever found a fully patched computer. If I have, I can't remember it. It's that rare. Patching facts. The following sections describe some very significant patching facts that most people overlook. Most exploits are caused by old vulnerabilities that patches exist for. Most devices are exploited by malware that looks for vulnerabilities that were patched a year or more ago. Survey after survey shows that most exploitation happens from vulnerabilities that the vendor patched 2 to 3 years ago. Some minor percentage of computers are never patched. If you enable an internet firewall looking to detect and identify exploitation programs trying to infect your computer or network, you will detect exploit tries that are only possible from computers infected over 15 years ago. Things like Code Red, SQL Slammer, and so on. There are occasionally 0 days, threats that exploit unpatched vulnerabilities, but they are very uncommon and routinely comprise less than 1% of all successful attacks on the Internet. Most exploits are caused by a few unpatched programs. In an average year, 5,000 to 6,000 distinct vulnerabilities are found in hundreds of different programs, but usually only a handful of programs are responsible for most successful exploitations. For example, the Cisco 2014 Annual Security Report, cisco.com/web/offers/lp/2014-annual-security-report/index.html, stated that unpatched Oracle Java accounted for 91% of all successful desktop web exploitations. If you included the other top 4 programs, they covered 100% of all successful desktop web exploitations. That meant anyone could patch just 5 programs and remove the majority of desktop exploitation risk in any environment. Java isn't exploited nearly as much anymore for a few reasons, including that the major browser vendors removed default Java interoperability from their browsers. But what is the #1 most exploited software program always changes over time. Years ago, it was DOS, then Microsoft Windows, Microsoft Outlook, or Microsoft Internet Explorer. Today, the most exploited programs are usually browser add-ins because they usually exist across multiple computer platforms. The most exploited programs may change, but the fact that a handful of top exploited programs account for most of the risk probably won't change anytime soon. The most unpatched program isn't always the most exploited program. There is a huge risk gulf between the most unpatched program and the most likely to be exploited unpatched program. A good computer security expert understands the difference and concentrates on the latter. For example, for many years, one of the most unpatched programs was Microsoft's runtime Visual C++ redistributable program, installed by many third-party programs. However, it is hardly ever exploited because it was installed and used differently by thousands of different programs, which made it hard to detect and exploit. Defenders need to focus on patching the critical security holes in the most likely to be exploited programs. Those programs are not always the most popular unpatched programs. You need to patch hardware too. Most hardware runs firmware of some kind. Firmware is basically software programs implemented into silicon chips, or as I like to say, harder to update software. Computer security defenders must make sure to patch their hardware, firmware, BIOS, and appliances along with their software. Common patching problems. If patching were easy, it wouldn't still be the big problem that it is today. The following sections describe some of the issues involved with patching. Detecting missing patching isn't accurate. No matter what program you run to check for missing patches, it will miss some percentage of devices. It's not always the patch management program's fault. Computer devices are complex machines with lots of moving, buggy parts, and any of those buggy parts can stop accurate patch checking. On top of that, users may use devices or versions that aren't supported by your patch-checking program, or your network security boundaries might be in the way. There are many more reasons why patch-checking status may not be accurate, but it suffices to say that they are never 100% accurate, and if you can't detect it, you can't patch it. You can't always patch. Sun, and now Oracle Java, has long been one of the most exploited programs when left unpatched, and unfortunately, most of the world left it unpatched for nearly 2 decades. Java programmers consistently write their programs incorrectly to rely on particular Java versions and features, and updating Java could break programs relying on a particular version. For that reason, most enterprises knew they had a high percentage of unpatched Java programs, and that Java was the biggest reason for successful exploits in their enterprises. But they still were not able to patch Java. It turns out that causing operational interruptions will get you fired far more quickly than simply reporting that you can't patch something because the business owner won't let you. Some percentage of patching always fails. As with checking for missing patches and for the same reasons, some small percentage of computers will never get the patch applied that you told them to apply. In my experience, that number of devices is around 1 to 2% on average, but sometimes it jumps way higher to something like 15 to 20%, depending on the complexity of the patch and the involved devices. One great way to defeat patching issues is to follow up and try to resolve the issues on computers that have poor patch detection and application rates. Patching will cause operational issues. Vendors try their best to reduce the number of operational issues caused by a particular patch, but they cannot be expected to test their patch on every unique combination of hardware and software that the patch might be applied to. Sometimes applying a very reliable and safe patch can be undone by previously undetected malware or an untested third-party program. Most companies have been burned by one or more patches, causing a significant operational interruption, and they are hesitant to apply future patches without lots of testing, which they often don't have the time or resources to do. Because of the fear of unintended operational issues, they either don't ever apply the patch or don't apply it in a timely manner. I understand the fear, but the risk of not applying critical security patches in a timely manner is higher than the possible, less likely operational issues. If you are worried about operational issues, just wait a few days. Most of the time, the serious operational issues are found by other faster adopters and resolved by the vendor so you can safely apply the patch. A patch is a globally broadcasted exploit announcement. When a patch is released to close a security vulnerability, if it wasn't already publicly known, it is now. Malware writers and exploit kit programmers will quickly examine any patch that comes out and reverse engineer it to find out how to exploit the now solved vulnerability. Because it takes the best patchers a few days to patch, and some people never patch, every newly released patch is another likely avenue for exploitation. Some vendors sneak high-criticality bug fixes into patches that address other issues and do not announce the bug. Later, they formally announce the vulnerability and provide an official patch. By that time, thanks to the earlier patch, the bug has already been fixed across a majority of computers. One very popular OS vendor once deployed a critical patch fix over several months of patches. To the reverse engineers, it looked like unexplained garbage code segments. But once 3 months of patches had been applied, the whole bug fix was applied to close the huge hole, leaving happy and mostly unaware customers and frustrated hackers. In the end, good patch management means one thing: timely, consistent patching of the most likely to be exploited programs. It's easy to say, but hard to do. My advice is to turn on all automated patching or use a reputable patch management program that can handle all your software patching needs, and hardware too if possible, and let critical security patches be applied within a few days. If you patch within a few days, you'll be among the most protected environments on the Internet. Perfect patching may not be easy, but patching the critical vulnerabilities of the most likely to be exploited programs is essential on any computer. Not doing so is effectively just asking to be exploited. In the next chapter, Window Snyder, a woman in charge of helping some of the largest companies in the world patch their products, is profiled.